Hi everyone, thank you all for coming. It's an honor to welcome Professor Ilan Pappe, a distinguished Israeli historian, author, and one of the most powerful voices for truth and justice in Palestine. Born in Haifa in 1950, spent decades researching and documenting the realities of Israel's founding and its ongoing impact on the Palestinian people. He has written 22 books, including the landmark The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, published in 2007, which continues to shape global understanding of the Nakba and its lasting consequences. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Professor Ilan Pappe.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good evening. I want first to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's my first, to my shame, my first ever visit to Luton. I've been 50 times in Luton Airport, but never in Luton itself, so this is quite exciting for me. And even more exciting to be in the march with so many good people around us. I'll try not to take too long because I would like to hear your questions to see what particular aspect of this terrible chapter we are in interests to discuss and talk about. But I'll kick off with a few remarks, and I hope that at least for some of you there's something fresh and new about it, and you're not familiar maybe with everything that can be said of the last 2 years, which is really what I would like to do, is to put them in a certain context, both historical and moral and political, and together maybe also can we do, or what should we do? Because like you, I'm sure, I feel very frustrated that despite the fact that millions of people around the world, like never before, show solidarity with the Palestinian people, trade unions in Italy and Spain declare a day of strike. Unfortunately, we did not convince the TUC to do this. Shame on them. Despite all of that, you feel that on the ground there's very little news you can bring either to the people of the Gaza Strip or to the people of the West Bank. There's a kind of mismatch between this global, unprecedented solidarity with Palestine and our inability to change the reality on the ground. And part of the frustration, or part of rather confronting, to my mind, the frustration, is to try and understand the reason for such a gap. And maybe if we analyze correctly the gap, or the mismatch as I call it, we can think together what we can do better and more effective. And I suppose the best way to look at this contradiction between the support on a popular level, on a massive level, and at best the indifference of governments, and at worst totally antagonism by governments to anything that is Palestinian or to the Palestinian suffering. For me, the best way to look at it is to talk about two global alliances. There is something that I call global Israel. It existed actually before the establishment of the State of Israel. In 1948, you could call it global Zionism at the time. Now it's global Israel. This is a bizarre global alliance. Bizarre because it has members in it that have contradictory agendas, different moral point of views, different ideologies, and yet they are united and had been united by the idea that a European Jewish state at the heart of the Arab world, at the heart of the Muslim world, sustained by the West, is a good idea. And it started actually very early on, and it's the best explanation that we have for an idea that actually, if you think about it, doesn't make sense. Not only morally doesn't make sense, even practically doesn't make sense. And yet, it became a reality. And that idea was 120, 140, maybe even 150 years ago, that Europe does not know how to deal with its Jewish citizens. Call it anti-Semitism, call it anti-Jewishness, call it racism against Jews, it doesn't matter. So many countries, so many national movements, so many governments, so many clergymen, so many poets and writers and philosophers said, the Jews are not really part of us. They can never be real Germans, real British, real Russian, real Romanians, and so on. And that kind of predicament allowed the first alliance to form, an alliance with all these members that didn't really agree about anything else. So one group of probably the foundational group that said, if we can't offer the Jews of Europe equality, why don't we dispatch them out of Europe? Send them out of Europe and help them to build a European state, but not in Europe. So the first motive was, if you want, anti-Semitism at its core. But that by itself could not have explained why did Palestine had to be the destination for that solution. It's an immoral solution, it's an unacceptable solution, but it still doesn't put Palestine on the map. It puts European racism on the map. And then another member of the alliance appeared, evangelical Christians. Not all evangelical Christians, but a particular stream in evangelical Christianity, especially popular in Britain and the United States, to a certain extent in Germany as well, that said, it's absolutely true that the Jews are a different nation, a different race, so they cannot be part of us. But they have a religious role to play. And that role can only be fulfilled in Palestine. They have to go to Palestine to precipitate the second coming of the Messiah, the resurrection of the dead, the beginning of the end of time. Now, people who believed in it were very powerful people. They were ministers in the cabinet. One of them was a prime minister. Two of them were presidents of the United States. They held very high positions in Germany. So whether we think this idea is bizarre or imaginary, it's less important, the idea is less important as the people who subscribe to the idea. And they were powerful people. So they joined these anti-Semitic early members of the alliance and pushed for the idea of not only expelling the Jews from Europe, but directing them to the place where they believed would bring back Jesus Christ and the rest of the story. Then you had a group of Jewish activists and intellectuals, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, that internalized what people said about them, accepted the idea that maybe they are not Polish, that they are not Russian, that they are not Romanian, that they are probably a nation by itself, and if they are a nation, they need a homeland. And because of the connection between Judaism and the Bible and the Old Testament, Palestine looked a reasonable destination for building a nation, a national homeland, if indeed Judaism is not religion but nationalism. Most Jews at the time, and I'm talking about the late 19th century, beginning of 20th century, rejected the idea that Judaism is a nationalism. They saw themselves as members of a faith, of a religion, not nationalism. But this minority of Jews had now a larger alliance, the anti-Semitic, the Christian Zionist, and then came the fourth member of that alliance to begin with, the British Empire, or rather the imperialists within the British Empire, who were unhappy with the fact that Britain already controlled most of the world before the First World War, and wanted more. And they particularly wanted the areas that were controlled by the Ottoman Empire in the Arab world, including Palestine. And they thought, okay, we have here an opportunity. We'll support this idea that the Jews be part of us, that they should be out of Europe, and we should help them to build a European state instead of Europe that didn't want them. And we would suggest it would be in Palestine because that would give us a pretext to have a foothold in the Arab possessions of the Ottoman Empire. So you see how these four different groups for different reasons are convening together, preparing a plan, first of all, to occupy Palestine and take it from the Ottomans, the Turks, and then to build a Jewish state there. At the time, there wasn't even one person in Palestine, whether they were Christian, Muslims, or Jews, who understood or could have known that far away there are people who are actually planning to turn an Arab country with a Muslim majority and a sizable Christian minority and a small Jewish minority into a European Jewish state. Nobody told them that this was happening. In fact, I don't think they even began to understand that powerful people outside of Palestine are already contemplating how to turn their country into a European Jewish country until the Balfour Declaration, until 1917, when Britain declared openly its part in the alliance, in what I call global Zionism. And even that was not immediately clear to the Palestinians, because it looked to them so bizarre that at the time when the Balfour Declaration was given, the Jews were less than 10% of the population, and most of the Jews who were in Palestine were Ottoman Jews who spoke Arabic and did not think at all about a Jewish state. It was very far removed from their ideas of who they were and where they were going to. Now, this alliance was powerful enough to convince the British government to occupy Palestine and to turn it into a Jewish state, or build the foundation for a Jewish state. The end result of this chapter in the alliance was that this particular alliance, which is mostly European, is responsible for what happened after 30 years of British rule. And this is the Nakba, the catastrophe, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. Because the moment you had a group of Jewish settlers supported by British imperialists, by Christian Zionists, we can call them, also by capitalist interests, the moment you have this kind of coalition, the settlers have a very strong backing to believe, like many white settlers who came to other places in the world, who were outcast in Europe and wanted to build a Europe instead of the Europe and didn't want them, like in North America and Australia and New Zealand. So they became what we nowadays call more clearly in the academia settler colonial movement, which meant they understood that actually the West, and particularly Europe at that time, supports their right not only to settle in Palestine, but to settle instead of Palestine. And very early on, they produced in the writing, in the poetry, in the fiction, this vision that more or less was based on the idea that for this project of building a Europe instead of the Europe that doesn't want you, for that project to succeed, the country has to be de-Arabized. Namely, you need to have as much of Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians as possible. And they already were convinced in it when there was still a small minority and didn't have even the capacity to implement this idea. Came 1948, and we had an additional factor, the Holocaust, that convinced quite a lot of Jews that maybe Zionism was the right solution for anti-Semitism because of the genocide of the Jews in Europe. With that, and the number of Jewish settlers in Palestine grew, but it was the global alliance that enabled the catastrophe of 1948, the ethnic cleansing of 1948. But what is remarkable about this formative historical chapter is that because it's in a way both immoral and impractical, to make it work you need a lot of force. You need violence. You cannot expect the Palestinians to say, okay, you know what, you're right. Centuries of European anti-Semitism, we are responsible for it. We are leaving the country, please take it, and so on. Of course, you need to use violence to turn this into reality. But what we learned after 1948, that you need violence to maintain it, not just to establish it, to maintain it. And to maintain a state that wants to be modern and even wants to be regarded as democratic, provided, of course, there's always an absolute Jewish majority. Otherwise, there's no point in having a democracy. For that, you need even a stronger alliance than the alliance that created the state in the first place. And that's where the United States comes into it, the picture. It was not enough to have the British Empire behind you. You need the American Empire behind it. It's much more, after the Second World War, a much more powerful actor. Well, one has to say the truth. In 1948, this global alliance included the Soviet Union as well. It fully supported the idea of a Jewish state in Palestine and provided the weapons with which the ethnic cleansing of Palestine created. Later on, after the June '67 war, the Soviet Union withdrew from that global alliance that gave the full protection or immunity, rather, to continue this project of taking over Palestine from the Palestinians for the sake of a Jewish state. And as we move in the years, we can see two trajectories, two processes. One is the need of the Zionist project itself, or the State of Israel later, to use gross violence in order to fulfill this idea that you can replace Palestine and the Palestinians with a Jewish European state. And you need more and more violence, and the reason is very simple. The people of Palestine, the moment they understand what they are facing, begin to resist. You have a colonialist project and you have an anti-colonialist resistance movement. And the resistance itself cannot just use non-violent means, it uses also violent means, which gives a pretext to the colonizer to use more violence, and we get into this quite familiar cycle that we are there. But the resistance forces the state to seek even a stronger alliance than the one they had beforehand. So it's not just enough to have the United States there. You need to have the military industries behind you, the security industries behind you, multinational corporations behind you. And what is remarkable, and this is true about, I think, the beginning of this century, that it takes time, but eventually huge sections of the world with different levels of interest and commitment, but huge, definitely in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, but also in the world at large, begin to see what is the price that the Palestinians pay for a problem they have nothing to do with. And that the price is being continued to be paid decade after decade after decade. It's not as if something happened in 48 and then everything somehow fell into place. It doesn't stop even for one day. Not one Palestinian inside historical Palestine, not one Palestinian outside historical Palestine is allowed to have normal life, is allowed to live without existential danger because of that project. And that creates the solidarity movement. That creates also the motivation for the national liberation movement to continue its resistance. But the global alliance is already very, very powerful at the moment that finally enough people in the world understand that something is totally wrong there in Palestine. And it's not just wrong in Palestine, it is reflecting on other injustices in the world. And but I would say until the last 2 years, until Gaza paid this horrific price, the anti-global, or the other global alliance, and I will talk about it in a minute, decided that Palestine is the epicenter of their struggle for against injustice, up to the last 2 years was quite weak compared to what I call the global Israel. So global Palestine was there from the very beginning. In the beginning of the state of Israel, it was very small, mainly in the left, in the West. And of course, some liberation movement in the global South that totally identified. But afterwards, it was not easy to create a counter-global alliance. The worst thing that happened... Is that not you? Okay. Okay. The worst thing that happened was that eventually also some Arab rulers, Arab regimes joined the global Israel alliance. So the immunity came not only from Europe and the West, but also from the region itself. And I think that what we are witnessing today is, for the first time, a global Palestine alliance that is really formidable. It's really formidable. Not in terms of the means of power that it has. You cannot compare, even if you have millions of people demonstrating in Trafalgar Square, they have less power to impact the reality than the British government. That's the reality. We have to accept it whether we like it or not. However, you have a feeling that this is dynamic, that this is not, you're not watching a still photo, you're watching a film, and that it continues, and it becomes more and more powerful and more effective. And I think that's the only reason to be hopeful today. Given everything we know what happens on the ground and happened on the ground the last 2 years, yes, it was possible for Israel to commit genocide because global Israel was powerful enough to at least allow the governments that could stop the genocide to show indifference. At best, I would say that some of them were directly complicit in the genocide. But let's say that some of them were not directly complicit in terms of giving the weapons or support, but their indifference is as bad as direct complicity. So yes, global Israel was strong enough to allow a televised genocide in our time to continue without any ability, any willingness of the political elites of the world to stop it, which is remarkable. It's incomprehensible in many ways, given what we know, given what everybody was seeing. But you know, you watch the BBC, you read even The Guardian, you understand that global Israel is still powerful filter that does not allow a proper coverage of what's going on. And if you don't have the real facts, and it's accompanied by fabrications and by demonization and so on, and now and the whole new idea that actually support for Palestine can be framed as support for terrorism and radicalism and so on, then of course you understand it's still a powerful global alliance. If it controls the media, it controls the public discourse and so on, and yet you feel that the society is not giving in. It's not giving in. That what happened in the last 2 years brought new faces, new ideas, new people into the global Palestine alliance. This is a message, and with this I'm beginning to wrap up. This is a message which for me is, you know, I have many students in the Gaza Strip. This is not a message I'm bringing them. I'm not saying to them, you know, I feel, which I do, I genuinely feel, a change is coming. I can't say it to them, because the change I'm talking about is not tomorrow, and not the day after, and they are not interested in what I have to say about 5 years from now. And I fully understand it. So I'm not trying to say to them, you know, I'm a bearer of good news and so on. No, I'm not saying it to them. To them I'm saying we are continuing to do every hour what we can to stop the genocide. That's the only thing, that's the only message people in Gaza want to hear. It was amazing to see how they reacted to the day of strike in Italy. It really caused, as one Palestinian friend said to me in Gaza, for the first time we smiled for a very short time, but we smiled. And then, of course, the smile was wiped out because of what goes on. So this is not, but the message is for us and not for the people of Gaza, because we will not see the dividends of what we are doing next year. I can assure you that. And not even the year after next. But we will see the dividends in 5, 10, 15 years from now. Of course, we should do all we can to shorten the period, to radicalize what we are doing, to escalate what we are doing, but we have to be realistic and pragmatic, and to understand that we are helping to build a global Palestine. And let's face it, whatever people say about balances of power, without a global Palestine, Palestine will not be liberated. Without a global Palestine, the suffering of the Palestinians will continue. The particularly Israeli political elite that now controls Israel is going to continue with its policies of destruction, ethnic cleansing, and oppression. There is no dynamics inside Israel that can indicate of any particular significant change in the near or even distant future. So this is not where our focus is. The focus is on the region and the world. And the region and the world has all the means, all the power, first and foremost to stop the oppression. The ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, the incremental genocide that now goes on in Gaza, the discrimination and apartheid system against the Palestinians inside Israel as Israeli citizens. But for this to happen, global Palestine needs to be as powerful as global Israel in determining the reality. And my last sentence would be that there is a connection between global Israel and fascism and populist leaders, and lack of social justice, lack of ecological justice, lack of any global plan to deal with poverty, with immigration. There's a connection. As long as global Israel is powerful, all these issues are marginalized. Issues that need global cooperation. The legal system of the world is not working. Any success in struggling or confronting ecological injustice, economic injustice, social injustice, is a success of fighting against the injustice in Palestine itself. So I think I'll stop here, and I will be very happy to take questions and comments.
Thank you. It's not working. Okay, it's working now. Sorry. Thank you, Ilan, for sharing your knowledge with us. Everyone's really happy to be here today to support you and listen to what you have to share as well. And I'm sure people want to ask some questions. So we'll open the floor to that.
Before asking a question, I wanted to do a small comment. Now, you are the most important Israeli anti-Zionist in Britain, come to Luton. And from Luton, we just exported our main racist and Zionist to Israel.
Well done.
Well, my question is this, I'm also a Jew like you, and I am an anti-Zionist. And in order to defeat Zionists, we need to convince as many Jews as possible. How can we undermine Zionists inside the state of Israel? Is there any way we can create an alliance with the Arab Jews in Israel or with the Ethiopian Jews in Israel? How can we undermine that alliance? No? And what is the solution? It's a Palestinian Democratic Republic for everybody. That's your idea.
Yeah, thank you. I'm afraid that there is little hope of changing the mindset of the vast majority of the Jewish citizens in Israel itself, in particular the Arab Jews, whose third generation actually is very racist and forms an important part of the electoral base for people like Netanyahu and the Messianic Zionists like Ben Gvir and Smotrich. We are doing what we can, but we have to face the reality that they are under an educational and rabbinical and theocratic system that is very difficult to fight from within. Which doesn't mean that people should give up on that, but to be realistic, this is not, I cannot see a huge transformation in the near future. What I do see is a change in the Jewish global perceptions of Israel. I participated, I don't remember, it was a few months ago, I don't remember exactly when, in the first anti-Zionist Jewish conference in Vienna. 400 people came, young and old, from all over the world. It's very clear that especially young Jews, including in the United States, don't want to be associated with Israel and Zionism. And this is going to have an impact on the Jewish community inside Israel. Again, these are slow historical processes. They don't happen in one year or 2 years, but it's happening. It is happening. So I think that one of the processes that make me feel that a huge transformation will happen is this one as well, the disassociation of Jews from Zionism and Israel. Historically, we know one process by itself doesn't make a change. There are different processes, and then at one moment in history, they be fused together into a powerful transformation. But this is definitely one of them. This is one of them. I don't think it concerns the Palestinians. They don't have to to bother with it. Where does it meet the Palestinians, after all? This is the last thing that you said. Because the so-called peace process was based on the idea that you don't have to ask the Palestinians what they want. You always tell the Palestinians what the Israelis and the Americans and the Europeans think is the best solution for them, including the last Trump so-called peace plan. So in order to turn it over into something that allows the Palestinians to be in the driving seat, one of the questions that they would have to answer, I'm not saying it's the most urgent question, but it's an important question that they will answer, and they never answered it because nobody asked them that, is how do they see the future of the 8 million Jews who live today in Israel? I know from what I hear and what I listen and what I converse and talk, I think the idea of one democratic state from the river to the sea is one answer to the question, what is the future of the Jews in Israel? They are offered equality instead of apartheid. Will they be happy with this? Right now, 95% of the Jews in Israel would tell you, we prefer apartheid than to live in a democracy. Will they change if the world would say to them, you have to decide between apartheid and democracy? That's a different question. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, yes. I actually worked on... Sorry, is that on now? Press and hold. Thank you. Closer. Yeah, I actually worked on the West Bank for a couple of years in the late 70s at Birzeit University. And my head of department at that time was Hannah Ashrawi. Hannah Ashrawi. So the subject obviously interests me a lot. I've just purchased your book, but only read about 10 pages of it. But
I hope you read more, but no. The idea is that you'll read the whole book, yeah. Okay.
Definitely read another page.
That's okay.
Yeah, you seem to be, just from the little I've read so far, you said quite a lot about the forces which are helping to change things, supporting this kind of global transformation from within Israel.
That's right.
In a sense, this kind of follows on from Isaac's question, but can you say a little more about those forces
Yeah.
which are transforming within?
Yeah. What I see is, as I said, several processes that each one of them by itself is not dramatic, but together they have the potential. So one of them is the social implosion of the Israeli Jewish society. I mean, this whole idea, we started my intervention today, was the fact that in order to create the global alliance of Zionism, you had to convince a large enough number of Jews that Judaism is not a religion but nationalism. This comes back to bite the Israeli Jewish society, because the two interpretations of what does it mean to be Jew in Israel, that somehow coexisted, and coexisted mainly because of this sense that maybe there's a common enemy, and because of the common enemy you have to be united, is not working anymore, because the theocratical, more fundamentalist interpretation of Judaism that used to be a very marginal point of view in Zionism became a very dominant one. And they want to influence the public space in Israel according to their beliefs, according to their interpretation of Judaism, which is against everything the secular Jews believe in. And there's really kind of a cold civil war going on, and I believe this will escalate to the point that it will tear this society apart. Again, nothing to do with the Palestinians, because both groups are very racist toward the Palestinians. But in between themselves, I find it very difficult to see in the distant future how you can sustain the Jewish society. That's one process. The other one is an economic process. Because the way Israel of today is transforming and developing, it will need to have a war economy forever. Now, a war economy is a huge expenditure. And even if you do a lot of money from selling weapons, especially to Western European countries, who generals convince the politicians that Russia is going to bomb Western Europe every morning in order to make money, even if Israel is one of the main supermarkets for these purchases, it would not be enough to maintain the economy. You will need the American taxpayer. And the American taxpayer until now paid $3 billion a year. In the last 2 years, the American taxpayer paid $14 billion a year. And I expect them, if they want to maintain Israel, they will have to double this kind of amount a year. Even Republicans did too much. So there is a connection between the economy of war and your main funder. Also, the Israeli army, I mean, is going through a process of disintegration in many ways. I mean, it's a very powerful army. We have seen what they did, what they can do. But there is this assumption in Israel that they will never face a conventional army on namely the Egyptians, the Jordanians, and so on. Only guerrilla like Hezbollah or Hamas, or faraway enemies, so to speak, like Iran, so you don't have a real confrontation. I'm not sure this will always be the case. You don't even need number 3. Okay. You don't even need a proper war, as I say in the book. Once you pass the 10 pages, you'll get there. You don't need a proper war with Egypt or Jordan or Syria. It's enough if the regime change there and say, we are not tolerating what you're doing. You don't even need the war itself to kind of send a message that this is not working. So you have economy of military, you have social cohesion, together with a growing international isolation, together with the disassociation of the Jewish communities from Israel. And one thing is missing in all this analysis is the Palestinian liberation movement. Right now in disarray, right now disunited politically, fragmented ideologically, but I think that if you look at the younger generation of Palestinians, and the Palestinian society is very young, wherever they are, it's one of the youngest in the world, I think that there is a generation coming up far more united than the present political elite or politicians, with a much clearer vision about liberation and so on. So I feel that they will also play their part, because everything I described up to now can lead to a disintegration of a state, but it doesn't promise what would come afterward is better. We can see what happened in Syria when it disintegrated. So we need a structured, organized, united Palestinian liberation movement to be there to fill the void when this is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Hiya. First of all, I'm from Luton, Friends of the Earth, and our sister organisation is PENGON, the Palestine Environmental NGO Network. So thank you for mentioning earlier the ecological horror and terror of genocide. That meant a lot that you mentioned that. And my question is kind of related. My question is to do with, as an educator, what do you think the impact could be if we truly, and I mean we Brits, truly entered into an education of teaching people, especially in high schools, teenage years, about the history of colonialism and imperialism, and actually making us understand what the British did in these countries, and also, India, Pakistan, Africa. I mean, the list of countries could go on. But helping the British people understand our history in a way that's hidden from us. And I wondered if you thought, how could that start, and do you think we'd ever get there? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the structure which leads eventually to textbooks and curriculum that teachers receive. Teachers are not totally independent in what they teach, and there is kind of a hierarchy and a structure and so on. So I think where it should start is not so much in the high schools. I think it should start in the universities, because the universities provide the knowledge. They produce the knowledge, and then it's translated into more popular avenues to make it more accessible for children at a tender age, or for teenagers in a more mature age. And the good news on the one hand is that recent events in Britain had to do a lot with the black community and so on. I wouldn't say decolonized the knowledge in British universities, that would be going too far, but there's definitely a realization that you need to decolonize the knowledge, namely that you have to start making sure that those who are the professionals who tell the educators what happened are willing to do this kind of, this kind of transformation, to undergo this kind of transformation. That's the good news. Compared to the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, a student is much more exposed to what the empire did and what the colonized people suffered. The bad news is that universities have become business corporations, and they think that teaching history is not it's not an asset. It's a financial liability, as they call it. And therefore they're not interested at all in developing history departments. Definitely if this history department is critical of the empire or critical of British policy anywhere else after the empire. So we have a struggle here on our hands of what is knowledge, who produces the knowledge, who controls the production of knowledge, and so on. And that affects the educational system as well. I don't think you can separate the education system from the wider circle. And the media, and I'm talking about the mainstream media in particular, again, I keep thinking about the sacrifice that the people of Gaza paid, but what they did in the last 2 years, not they directly, but what happened there did, I don't know about you, but it's very clear for me and my friends, my neighbors even in Exeter and so on. We totally lost our confidence in what once we thought we were proud of our mainstream media. We would say the BBC, the broadsheet, we may not even agree with their ideology, but this is professional journalism. The last 2 years, can you call the BBC coverage of Gaza professional? It's taken from the prayer book of Israel. And the same is true about the main printed media. And we know because we have alternative media. We know what's happening really. So we have here a real problem of who controls knowledge, and that is both affecting educational system, the media, the academia, and eventually the politics as well.
Hi, Ilan. Hi. My name's Tassine. I'm from Luton. I'm also a student journalist. I was just trying to connect the dots here because being somebody who's born and raised from Luton, we're sort of tarnished by the record of Tommy Robinson, who's also. I was just going to say, as a child growing up through this area and obviously seeing how the rise of fascism's going throughout our country and obviously seeing a likeness towards the Palestine solidarity movement and how people are moving, where do you think young people should stand in this and what should be our stance going forward?
Well, I do think it's important for young people to understand, and I'm sure many of them do, but maybe it's good to re-articulate it, that fighting or showing solidarity with the struggle against injustice in Palestine is not showing solidarity with a place far away that has no relevance to your own life in Luton. That there is a direct connection between the injustice in Palestine and the social and economic injustice people in Luton feel, or we talked about ecological injustice. So yes, sometimes you have to choose one particular topic that epitomizes, that symbolizes everything else. It can be Palestine today, it can be something else next day. I mean, if you look at the million of young Italians who are demonstrating, mostly young Italians, it's not that they think that there is no other issues in the world that deserve their attention, not that they think there are no other issues in Italy that deserve their attention, but they believe that the Italian government's policy towards Palestine is indicative of everything that they don't like in Italian politics. And that's why they go in the millions waving the Palestinian flag, calling for the freedom of Gaza, and really showing a powerful manifestation of solidarity. So there is a connection. You have to study this connection to understand it, but it is connected. It is connected because most of the most formidable challenges we have as a human society can only be dealt with by global cooperation. And global cooperation is useless if you don't have an agreed international justice system. And what Gaza exposes, that what we call the international justice system, is a very exceptionalist one, that it's a very hypocritical international justice system. It doesn't judge the West. It was not meant to judge the crimes of the West, only of the rest. And that explains why you cannot cooperate globally on issues such as ecology, poverty, and immigration. And Gaza exposed it. He just exposed it. And I think that's why if you are active on behalf of Gaza and on behalf of Palestine, you are also immediately and organically active on the other issues I've just mentioned.
Hi, do you have any advice for those working against complicit institutions like universities that we've been talking about, for students or staff who are pressuring them to divest and decolonize?
I think students know exactly, you're right. I mean, we've shown the encampments during the last academic year. I think students can have two sets of demands. One is from their own university as an institute or an institution to examine its institutional connections to Israel and especially to the Israeli military industry, as some university students did. It's very important to expose it and to ask the university how does it feel about this kind of complicity. And then there is the demand that the teaching, the research, the studying would use the right frameworks when it deals with Palestine. And we still are fighting for this, to call the Zionist movement a colonialist movement, to define Israel as an apartheid state or a settler colonial state, to describe what happened in 48 as ethnic cleansing, what's happening in the West Bank as ethnic cleansing, what happened in Gaza as genocide. All this should be demanded not as a political position, but as an objective scientific analysis of what goes on. So for that, you need the academia. And students should demand it because, you know, academic courage can be oxymoron. Not many courageous academics. And they need to know what is demanded from them if they want to claim to be the educators of the next generation.
Hi there. Question, we've spoken about the West's complicity in general. We've not really addressed the so-called Muslim Arab leadership. I think a lot of the people from that neck of the woods, we've seen the silent complicity of the Arab leaders who have not only not said anything, but have actually been helping and abetting the genocide. What do you see happening in the near future in terms of how those societies will move in the direction of Palestinian solidarity? Because obviously the people we believe are on the side of Palestine, but the leadership, which is totally in the clutches of the West, have shown complete blindness to what's happening, and in many cases have been shipping arms, food, oil, etc., etc. So where does that society begin to change, and how do you see that moving forward, A, in terms of their leadership, and B, in terms of the society in general? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think we have in the Arab world the same problem we have in the West in many ways, this gap between what the people want and what the governments are doing. It seems not to be unique to the West, it's also true to the Arab world. The Arab world suffers from the fact that there are many people who are rulers, but not many people who are leaders. And that is helping Israel to get not only immunity from the important Arab countries, but also it allows Israel to rely on the Arab regimes to normalize the wiping out of Palestine, the dispossession of Palestine and the Palestinians. But this is not going to hold water, to my mind. I think that there are two processes here which will mature in the future. One started in the so-called Arab Spring, which, you know, people think is over because there was a counter-revolution. Like in every revolution, you have a counter-revolution, but it's not over that. It's not over because many of these regimes are not only incapable of showing solidarity with the Palestinians, they are also incapable of solving the most important issues concerning their societies. We have millions of people who are both hungry and angry in the Arab world, and this will burst out for sure. Secondly, you have here a situation which particularly is important for the East Mediterranean, what we call in Arabic the Mashraq, the Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Mediterranean is, to my mind, a political structure that is under the danger of being disintegrated. Danger or hope, it depends on one point of view. The nation states of the Eastern Mediterranean were all created by Britain and France in less than an hour in 1916, in an agreement between the Director General of the British Foreign Office and the Director General of French Foreign Office, the Quai d'Orsay. And then they created these nation states. They called one Syria, the one Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine, not knowing yet that Palestine actually they meant Israel, but because that was in 1916. And what they did, they imposed a nation state, a European nation state idea on an area that was a mosaic of communities that genuinely coexisted with one another, and created this kind of instability that still affects, together with Zionism, affects the whole area. So I think that there is a transformation in the making, not only in Israel becoming Palestine again, if you want, but also Jordan and Lebanon and Syria totally changing the way they look today. And this is something that, again, will take time, but to my mind is inevitable. It's inevitable because there is, and we saw it in Syria, and Lebanon is very near to have the same issue of this imposition of an supra-nation state idea which is alien actually to the area. Not to mention about Jordan, which is another, I mean, a Hollywood scriptwriter would not be able to bring us such a film of how a country like Jordan came into being, you know. A prince of a family in Hijaz, unhappy, takes his family and says, I'm going to occupy Damascus. And Winston Churchill said to him, you know what, don't go to Damascus, I'll give you a little bit of Syria and let's call it Transjordan. And then you have the Hashemite dynasty. So these are abnormalities. History shows us that they come to bite you later on. Exactly, I'm not a prophet. I don't know exactly how it will unfold. But I don't think that what we see today is what we're going to see tomorrow. And all I can see is a far better future for Palestine in that different kind of reality.
Thank you very much, Professor Pappe, for coming for your talk and generally for everything that you continue to do, all the work that you have done and continue to do. On hope, which you touched on near the end of your speech, I think we all want to be positive. We try to be positive, and it's really, really difficult, as you kind of alluded to. But we've been here before. Operation Cast Lead, Operation Protective Edge. This one is nothing like what we saw there. So, and then you've alluded to it before as well, that the global Palestine is strong and is growing, but, and you've said as well, global Israel is already strong, and it's probably not growing in terms of numbers, but it's becoming more ideologically or politically entrenched. That's big business, that's media establishment, that's politicians, the arms companies. They are who we are fighting against. So under that context, what reason do we have, and it's terrible saying this under this context given the fact there's a genocide, but what reason do we have to be hopeful in a practical sense? We saw the recognition 50, 60, 70, 100 years too late of the Palestinian state, but what else should our next steps be? What can we be hopeful for?
First of all, hope is not, as you know, it's not just pragmatic. It's I don't think the Palestinians have a luxury for us losing our hope. So we need to stick to it, whatever happens. But more concretely to what you say, I think that there are certain things happening that we never thought would happen ever happen, which indicate that there is an accumulative effect to what we are doing that eventually gets to the top. I'll give you a few examples. It would have been unthinkable since 1948 to think that a Democratic candidate in the United States need to think twice, what is better, to show support for Israel or to show support for Palestine? This has never happened before. Never happened before. Never happened before that in the biggest Jewish city in the world, the leading candidate is a very open supporter of global Palestine, an opponent of global Israel. Each such dot by itself is not a reason to jump from the chair and say, you know, something different is happening. But these are indicators that it's not anymore a marginal phenomenon. It begins to go up, not up enough, not high enough, but higher than ever before. You know, even the fact that Birmingham is telling the Israeli footballers and their fans, you're not welcome here, is an unthinkable event in the history of British football. The fact that there is a serious discussion in UEFA and FIFA, all these seem to not be enough reasons for hope, because, as I said in my talk, they do not change the reality on the ground. But it's a terrible thing to say, but we should be hopeful not because we have the formula to stop the criminal policies tomorrow, but we do have, and I believe we do have the formula to stop it in a more distant future. And these are the indicators for this. Now, what we have to do is I don't think we need some new ideas. I think we know what we should do, but I think we have to stick to it. We have to stick to these ideas. We have a problem with our politicians, not only here. They are self-centered, they see politics as career, they're not interested in really what matters to people, they're just about themselves. But they do listen to electoral predictions. So in some areas we can make Palestine an issue, that we can force them to think about it, even if it's not a moral reason why they should do this. So I do believe that we have to stick to this accumulative idea, but by all means, if we should keep thinking of how to radicalize it, how to escalate it in a clever way. And I think that this is something the initiatives such as the flotilla has shown us. It started with one ship, and then it became 2 ships, and then it became 56 ships, and a ship. You know, this shows you the way people understand the importance of numbers, the importance of continuation of an effort, and so on. It's hope in the sense that even if you don't see the dividends in your lifetime, or definitely not in the present, I think we should be, and this is genuine for my part, believe that it will have an impact, you know? And imagination is also important. Imagination, it's very important to imagine a different world. You know, Antonio Gramsci said that there's no revolution without imagination. I think we're lacking a bit of imagination because we are so desperate by what we see, but we should imagine. We should imagine Palestinians living as free people. This will help. I'm not saying this is the formula, but this will help in keeping us on track with our pressure. And I mean, let's really seeing 500, 600 old ladies and old gentlemen sitting in front of the parliament, requiring 25 policemen to evict each one of them, is fantastic. It's incredible. It really is. It shows you that even stupid decisions such as prescribing Palestine Action as a terrorist organization can be challenged. And you don't judge the struggle, success or defeat just right now. If you continue with the struggle, you succeed in the end. Because it's such a stupid idea and illogical that I'm sure even some people in the police begin to understand it. Yeah, all these are small struggles that, you know, together are doing something. But listen, we are all human beings, and we are entitled to moments of despair because of what we are watching. As you said, this is global Israel. It's very, very powerful. But, you know, if we don't believe that we can defeat them, then what we are doing here, right?
We have our traditional parties who are either complicit in what's happening in Gaza, or the most they do is ask questions in Parliament. But at the same time, what we've got developing in this country are 2 quite huge movements. One would be the Green Party, and the other one would be Your Party. Now, I'd just like to hear what you think, or how do you see any hope in that kind of situation, that things are changing, and that the traditional parties, ignoring the millions of people who come out every month on the streets and bang their pots outside, totally ignoring it. So how do you look at the situation now with these new political groupings that are moving forward?
I think that something that is characteristic of both right-wing governments and Labour parties that try to be diet right-wing parties is incompetence. And incompetence eventually is felt by people, some of the people who vote for them. And I do think that we need to go back to the traditional values of the left. And we need a proper party of the left in this country, because the incompetence is really affecting people of the working classes, the lower middle class, our public services, and so on. And all these attempts probably began with Blair, but even before Blair, all these attempts to look at the center as a kind of a shrine that is where actually all the pragmatic and good solutions are there economically and socially, has turned out to be a total failure. And therefore we do need, but also the left needs soul searching. Needs to be less racist. It needs to be much more accommodating towards multiculturalism, multi-ethnicity. There's a lot of work to be done to redefine what really we mean by that. But taking, trying to regain public confidence in front of manipulative politics, shallow politics, which you can show how destructive they are for the economy and for the people, is a project that needs to be built. It's not enough. You can do it. It's not enough to have sound bites and launching of new parties and so on. It needs a lot of rethinking and contemplation. And sometimes politicians don't have the energy or the patience to do that. But I do think so. I do believe that needs to be a redefined left, so to speak, very much building on the past, but rethinking its attitudes towards religion, towards tradition, towards ethnicity, and so on. But I do think it's a possible project. It is a possible project. And in this country in particular, it can create a mosaic or a rainbow rather than mosaic, a rainbow of people's identities and views and backgrounds that share enough in common to defeat the established parties. But again, it's hard work and it's a deep breath, long-term projects. You can't buy them in the supermarket. You have to produce them yourselves. Yeah.
Hi there, God, that's loud. Just wanted to ask about some of the fundamental issues within Palestinian society that are also having to be overcome, I guess, because as much try as we might in the West and elsewhere to fight on our battlegrounds that we can, I suppose there are some issues internal to like the PLO and, between the West Bank and Gaza and places like Ramallah, and I don't know, there's obviously differences of opinion and approaches to politics. I just wondered what you see happening in that regard and what maybe needs to change there to be more unity so that proper change can be brought about. Thanks.
Yeah, well, there are two things to be said. One I already kind of alluded to, that the younger Palestinian generation is far more united, both in its vision and its collaboration with each other. I think they realize that they need to work more on structure and organization. Should they revise the PLO? Should they create an alternative to the PLO? It's up to them. I mean, we're not going to tell them what to do. But I do believe that they know that this is their mission. And then you will see that different Palestinian constituencies are already in the younger generation, because of the benefit of internet and so on, communicate, where in the past the older generations had physical boundaries that disabled any collaboration and talking. So that's one side of this. But more importantly, I think it's very important also as a message to the British public that we want to convince to join us. There's a difference between a normal society that has issues, for sure. It has division, it has crises, and ups and downs, and so on, as a human society. And on the one hand, and a society that is all the time under existential danger. When you are under existential danger, you don't have time to deal with the normal issues. When Palestine will be liberated, and it will be liberated, then it will be a normal society, which means it will have a lot of problems. It will have many, many issues to resolve, both Palestine and the Arab world, into which Palestine will be reintegrated after 150 years in which it was excluded from the Arab world. So we're not trying to beautify the Palestinians. We're not trying to idealize them or romanticize them. We're trying actually to normalize them, to humanize them. And therefore, I don't spend much time when people, kind of asking me about the Palestinian internal issues and so on. And I say, yes, they will have internal issues. And they will have a lot of problems. But right now, this is not what bothers them. Right now, they are under acute danger of being destroyed and eliminated. So when I come to a person in Britain and I say to them, I need you to help me to stop an extermination, elimination. That's your role. I actually want the British government to feel that this is role. I mean, the one thing I didn't like about the recognition of the Palestinian state, that it was connected in the minds of European leaders such as Macron and Starmer with the traditional European role of being the mediator between Arabs and Jews. Europe doesn't have to mediate between Arabs and Jews. Europe needs to defend the Palestinians from extinction. That's Europe's role. And they don't understand it. Or they do understand it and they ignore it. It doesn't matter. The end result is the same. So I think that is something there to think about, about what is going on. And definitely, Israel is a colonialist power, among other things, uses divide and rule. We've seen it in Gaza. They armed these criminal gangs in the Strip in order to fight Hamas. They've done it before in the West Bank. They're doing it inside Israel. That's how colonialism is using natural and normal division that you have in a society in order to destroy it from within. And we should really be aware of that.
Yes, first of all, I'd just like to make an announcement before I make my contribution. This Saturday, there's going to be in Luton a bike ride for Palestine. If you can, anyone who can cycle, who's got a bicycle, if you haven't, buy one or borrow one. Come down 11 a.m. St. George's Square this Saturday and bring your flags, put them on your bikes, and there'll be I'm not sure how long it is, but Rahid here, if you want to ask him about it later, any details, he'll be able to tell you where the route is or what the planned route is. Okay. On a little contribution and a question that comes from it. It's really a follow-on from Vanessa's question. It's really to do with the unity of the Palestinians and the movements. I think just so people know the history of this, Hamas was actually, when they were formed out of the Muslim Brotherhood, they were quite small and they were actually encouraged by Israel. And what a lot of people maybe do know is that Israel facilitated their rise by making sure they got funding through Qatar and other means, and making sure they were there to oppose the PLO, because they saw at the time PLO as an imminent danger and able to resist, and they thought the best way to tackle that within the Palestinians is to divide them, and they succeeded. And I think everybody now knows that there is actually a contradiction for the Israeli government and what they're trying to do, because in the genocide, their stated opinion was they have to destroy Hamas. But they have a contradiction, because if they destroy Hamas, they're then helping unify the Palestinians. So what do they do? And I think a lot of what we see today in accepting this, and the fact that Hamas has not been exterminated and still has many people armed and supporting them, is actually part of the fact that I believe that Israel have not been doing a genocide to kill Hamas people, but to kill and demoralize the Palestinian people. And that's been their aim, and that's what they're doing, and that's why of the so-called 67,000 plus 100,000 plus more dead are mostly children, women, men, civilians living in Gaza. But that comes back now to a question for you, Ilan, is what do you think what's happening now, where Israel is caught in this contradiction, but at the same time, I think Hamas is still seen by many Palestinians as actually carrying forward an armed struggle, but so are other groups. But how much do you think this may bring back an idea of a unified Palestinian resistance, and Hamas is forced into a position where they have to agree with the other group, Fatah, with the other groups, and maybe we know about the PA, the Palestinian Authority, but they're very small. They've got very small support as the PA, but doesn't mean that Fatah hasn't got a lot of support, because they do. So, what do you think is going to happen in the near future on that score?
You know, since Israel took over much of Palestine in 1948, and then occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, Palestinian resistance took every possible form that is known to us about resistance, from non-violent resistance through individual resistance to an organized resistance, to guerrilla warfare, to terrorist attacks. They've tried everything. And the balance of power was such that not one square inch of Palestine was liberated. On the one hand. On the other hand, the oppression continues, the ethnic cleansing continues, the genocide is replaced by incremental genocide. So there will be another uprising. I don't know what form it will take. As I said, every uprising was very different from the other. The first intifada was very different from the second intifada. If you go to the refugee camps as I do sometimes, in the West Bank, to say that someone can tell you which of the faction is the dominant force among the teenagers of the refugee camps is ridiculous. On Monday they resist on the name of Hamas, and on Wednesday in the name of Fatah, on Thursday on the name of the left, which shows you that this is not a membership thing and not affiliation with factions. These are young people who think that there are two options: either to die through the oppression, or die through fighting the oppression. The affiliation is something that is important for the older generation, not for the young generation. I don't think they really care in the name of whom they are fighting. They're fighting in their own name, basically. So I can see the fourth, I don't know, maybe it's the fourth intifada happening in the future in a very different form than the first two ones. And I think it would be much less connected to organizations, far more localized. But again, this is a prediction. It might be wrong. I'm much more interested in saying that can we convince the world, and especially the West, that this can be averted? That there is a direct connection between the violence shown on the 7th of October and the complicity of the West with helping to maintain an apartheid state that colonizes, ethnically cleanses, and oppresses another people. That they cannot disassociate the two. So if they're worried about the impact of another uprising, they should understand that they are not onlookers, but they can play a very important role in both averting it or creating the conditions for it to happen again. Yeah. Two more questions.
So my question really was thinking about the impact of the BDS movement and what that's doing to the, because it seems to be gaining momentum. So I was just wondering how you thought that was affecting the situation.
Yeah, I think the BDS movement did very, very important things. I think it's a very crucial factor in the success of what we call tonight the Global Palestine Alliance. It was successful not only by here and there also influence the reality on the ground, but it gave an orientation to the solidarity movement at the time when the Palestinian political scene was fragmented and disunited. It gave us a kind of gravity. We knew that it doesn't matter what happens between the West Bank and Gaza or Hamas and Fatah, we know what we have to do. And I think this is a very important message. It's a very important conversation to have with the Israelis. That there is a price tag attached to what they are doing. Again, this is not a substitute for a solution. This is not the only way of struggling for liberation. But as we know from the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, it plays a very important role. And historically, I believe it would be judged as a very important factor in ending the oppression of the Palestinians. So we should continue to be active in it in every possible way that we can. Yeah.
Last one, Ilan.
Thank you.
No pressure then. Well, first of all, I want to bring greetings of solidarity from Bedford Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. There's a few of us here tonight. We'd love it if you can make the journey a few miles up the A6 to come and talk to us in Bedford. You get a really warm welcome. I think one of the most moving things that I heard you say was when you talked about the general strike in Italy, the one-day general strike, and how that kind of lifted the spirits of the Palestinian people, albeit briefly. And I suppose I want to understand what Italian trade unionism has that British trade unions don't have. They have a fascist leader in Italy. Well, we have a prime minister who's trying to out-reform and out-fascist the fascists almost on a daily basis. But I think our unions are in a parlous state. I mean, I'm a member of Unite. I work for Unite. Unite members are part of the genocidal supply chain. Now, we passed at our policy conference 2 years ago a resolution on BDS. It wasn't the first time. There's a lot of us who are very active in Palestinian solidarity within our trade union, but we haven't been able to organise, as we saw, during apartheid in South Africa or the Chilean coup back in the 70s, that kind of solidarity action where we have workers actually coming out and saying, no, I'm not going to make these bombs. I'm not going to transport these bombs. I'm going to learn from what's happened in Italy, Spain, Greece, Belgium we were hearing about the other day. So what do you think, how do we get that movement in our British trade union movement? I'm thinking particularly of Unite, because I think it's pivotal because of its membership and the sectors, aerospace, defence that Unite members are in.
how do we get that in this country, but also how do we globalise it and sustain it so it's not just a one-day strike, it's actually an all-out global general strike?
In Italy, the major trade unions were reluctant to join the day of strike. What the Italian students did, which was clever, they went to some of the smaller unions and convinced them to declare that they will take on the strike, and then some bigger unions join in, and eventually the biggest unions join in. So in a way, because of the military industry, you probably don't want to start there, but there are not everybody who is unionized in this country is unionized in aerospace or military industry. So maybe that's not where we should begin. For those workers in military industry, again, this is where Gaza exposed how globalized is the problem it faces. We need, I know Jeremy Corbyn, at least on this, really devoted his life to think of how do you go to workers that this is their livelihood and saying, what are you producing? And what can you offer them as an alternative? Which needs someone at the top to re-strategize the whole economy. And again, this is one of these issues you cannot do nationally. You have to do it globally. And I'm not naive. I know this is the hardest of them all, disarmament. I mean, genuinely, disarmament. So I don't think that this would be the easiest union or the easiest section of the workers to recruit, but I would start with those who are not directly involved in this is not their livelihood. And hopefully this would create not just a strong solidarity with Palestine, but also the world needs rethinking about everything that is connected to arms industries. I don't know how many of them are aware that every time Israel attacks in Gaza, it goes to all its clients around the world and said, we have a proof that the new weapons are working because we've tried them in real life, not not no simulation here. This is real. We need to make people understand that this is how it works. Genocide is very good for the business of military industries. And again, how does this affect people's livelihood is something we need to think about in a constructive way to understand that people need alternative. Diversifying the industry, replacing it. We haven't invented the wheel. Bernard Russell was thinking about it many years ago. It's good to go and read again some of the works of people who were thinking about it when arms industry was still not very powerful. They had some good ideas, but of course they didn't face the same kind of multinational corporation of military industry that we are facing today. But it's worth thinking about in that direction, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan, for your time, and also thank you everyone for coming and showing your support, especially those who travelled from outside of Luton as well. I know we've got some people from Bedford and surrounding areas as well. So yeah, please can we give a round of applause to Ilan. Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Thank you, everyone.